All right, guys, we're back. AWC TV, episode 11 with Coach Simpson. We're really excited to have you on. I know it's taken a while to get you in here, but I think it's great for you and I to kind of sit down and Coach Schmaine, who'll be on in a few minutes, just to kind of talk at a high level of what's going on in your world. And I realize that a lot of people don't have the same level of interaction with you or know your history that well. So I thought it might be helpful just for you to kind of talk about how you got started in wrestling as a little one. I know you have a big wrestling family, so you want to tell us when you got started and how that all went in the beginning?
Yeah. First off, man, I've watched several of the episodes and love what you guys are doing. I think it's great. It's a time where wrestling's really limited. I think discussion about wrestling is really huge right now. And I think this is great, to be able to expose not only the youth program that we have that's very excellent at Arlington, but also bleeding into the high school program with Coach Salzman and Coach Cordero and Coach Pagan too. I think that's been great, and having like Luke Kearns on as former wrestlers that come through both programs, I think is really, really good. So I really like what y'all are doing and the content you're putting out. As far as me, I started wrestling at a very early age, coming out of a family that had a lot of individuals wrestle. Had multiple uncles that were coaching, multiple uncles that were officiating and did for a number of years. Still have two uncles that are currently coaching, with several of my cousins that coach on different levels, whether it be high school, youth, middle school levels, so on and so forth. So kind of a family thing for me. We were wrestling from a very, very early age at family gatherings and matches and tournaments. And usually it was kind of one of those things that if you were out at a tournament, there were other kids would run around, you grab one of them, you go in the back where the warm-up mats are, and you wrestle around back there. So did a lot of that. Attended a ton of wrestling practices as a kid, whether it was with my dad, whether it was with my uncles, and did a lot of that. So been around wrestling, been in a wrestling room for, as long as I can remember. So as far as participating within wrestling in a competitive fashion, really didn't start that until I had middle school age group. And I think that's a great time for kids to really start to participate in things that are like tournaments, because tournaments last a long time. And I'm not going to get into my thoughts about how tournaments should be organized and stuff like that. But I think when you're that age, you can your attention span, while being very short, is good enough that you can handle those kinds of things. And I really think you should develop a knowledge of the sport before you start competing. And I feel like I had a good number of years to be able to do that before I really started competing. Growing up, we didn't have periods and time, and you just wrestled till somebody got pinned or somebody just was too tired to wrestle. So moving into the competitive realm was very different for me, and I had to learn. I had to learn about time. I had to learn about periods. I had to learn about, you only have so long to wrestle, and you better put points on the board. And if you don't have enough points, if you have less points than he does at the end of the time, then that's not a win for you. And I think my uncles and my dad did a good job with me, and a lot of my cousins, all of my cousins really, in teaching us to take competition for what it was. It's a chance to test your skills. It's about how do your skills match up? How can you execute your skills more than it was about wins and losses? Because for us, being with our dads and our uncles being family, you had to see that person after the match, and then when you stepped off the mat, you had to see him in the car on the ride home, or you had to see him at family dinner, or you had to see him at Thanksgiving, all those kinds of things. So the dynamic between being your coach and being a family member, they navigated really, really well. And my Uncle Frank, God love him, he had to do it a lot with his 5 boys. And my Uncle Pat has had to do it with several. He did it with his son. He did it with several of his nephews. And they both wrote an article about separating yourself, separating those roles. And they did a really good job, set a really good example for us. And my dad was the same. While you were on the mat, it was a coaching deal, but once you stepped off the mat, it was back to being your dad. Particularly in the car on the ride home, it was about being your dad. So kind of grew up in that atmosphere. Got to being towards the end of my middle school career, got an opportunity to wrestle with a lot of high school kids through wrestling and all-star teams, which was great for me as a young competitor. Because I had experience and I got to wrestle against older guys, and it was super humbling. I remember being a 7th grader, having to wrestle on the high school team, and getting to wrestle with some really, really successful and excellent wrestlers that came out of the Memphis area. And I just remember that first go round, I got oil canned by this guy who's going to be a senior. He's 4 years older than I am, and he just, I could do no right, and he could do no wrong. And I just remember going back to that bench feeling so defeated, and several of those guys kind of taking me under their wing and saying, I know that wasn't what you wanted, but you have to understand that where you are, you're going to be so good. Like, that's going to be you in a few years where you're going to do that to somebody else, and they're going to feel like that, and you're going to feel like he feels right now. And so that changed my perspective on the success base of wins and losses, which was it was big for me then. I think it helped me a lot with people talk about being mentally tough. I think it put me in a different headspace as far as what do you really look at to judge your performance? If you're looking at L's and W's, it's not a great indicator. And if you're basing kind of your value as a wrestler on wins and losses, that's the wrong place to be. So going through my high school career, I got to do a lot of those things continued on. And they went from just being local regional teams to state teams and things of that nature. I ended up having a similar experience, but being on the other side of it. We wrestled for Team Memphis, went to the national duels, and we had a kid that started for us that was an incoming freshman, super talented kid. He filled a weight class that we couldn't get anybody else to fill, and he really struggled. Being really, really young, we were wrestling really, really good guys, and we were wrestling best kids in states. And I just remember him getting really beat up. I mean, the kid that he wrestled was an older kid, and he just beat him up physically. He put a lot of points on the board, but he just beat Matt physically. And I remember, kind of telling him the same things, like, where you are in your development, his development, they're drastically different, but you're going to be so good. And I think that was really where I kind of figured out, like, hey, I may want to coach at some point in time when my competitive career was over. Just that opportunity to give back and be around guys that were really, really supportive. And actually off that team, between my junior and senior year, every kid we had that wrestled on that team, and it was just a club team. We were just a small club out of Memphis, wrestling, state teams from Missouri and Illinois and Oklahoma, and kind of the beasts of the beasts. And we're just this local club, with kids trying to hold their own. Out of that team, every single kid but one qualified for the state tournament the next year, and several people ended up coming home with state medals. The one kid that didn't qualify for the state tournament off that team got hurt in the middle of the season with a season-ending injury, blew out his knee. But he was there. I mean, he would have qualified for the state tournament. So those experiences were for me, exceptional. They allowed me to take that and turn that around with my high school team and do a lot of things with the guys that were on the high school team. Wrestling at Christian Brothers, I came in a year after they graduated, I think 10 of 13 at that time starters. So it was a very young team, lots and lots of sophomores. I think we had 3 seniors on the team that year, and one of them ended up getting beat out at the end of the year. So we were super, super young. And then those guys that were in my freshman class ended up being very, very good their freshman year. I think we won the freshman city, beat Germantown, which was the first time that had been done, and I couldn't even tell you how long. So we had a special group of guys that were all together, and a lot of us stuck with it. Some guys, dropped off and this, that, and the other, but most of those guys stuck around for 4 years. So by the time we were seniors, we really were kind of looking to dethrone Germantown, who at the time was kind of like where we are now. They had won several region titles in a row. Kind of looked like they were just a machine. Coach Bradley just had it popping off at Germantown during that time. And so got to wrestle with those guys for a number of years, and it was a great experience. Some of those guys were really, really good friends. We went through lots of ups and downs together over the course of 4 years. So great experiences there. Ended up being a 2-time state qualifier, 2-time region champ. One as a sophomore, coming off been out for half a season with a shoulder injury that I probably should have had surgery on, but it had ended that season. Came back, won the region. Did not have the state tournament I wanted to. Probably be honest, I wasn't ready for it. Just because of the limited mobility that I had and the limited amount that I could train. Then my junior year, we picked up a death sentence from the TSSAA, no postseason for us. Came back as a senior, had a pretty good season, wrestled some really, really good guys, had some tournaments where I wrestled really, really well, had some tournaments I didn't. Got to wrestle a kid who was a returning national champion at the Father Ryan tournament. And that was a great experience. But got to wrestle some really high caliber, high quality individuals while I was competing in high school. Ended up losing in the state semifinals in sudden victory to the returning or defending state champ. I'm not sore about it, even though it's been more than 20 years, just a little bit. Lost to him in sudden victory, and had to regroup and reevaluate my goals. I had one goal that year, and everything worked towards it, and then it didn't happen. So I had to regroup rather quickly and figure out, like, hey, I can't get what I truly wanted. So come back and get the best that you can. Ended up taking third. Left that season with a lot of bumps, bruises, and injuries that took a lot of time to rehab. Went into college, had a short stint wrestling in some open tournaments, but without regular training and my body not holding up, I had to go ahead and make the decision that my competitive career was over. But I look back at it and I look at some of the things I was able to do. I got to wrestle overseas. I got to represent my country, which was a really, really big thing for me. I'm super, super proud of that. Super proud that I had that opportunity, and got to go several different places. Got to see parts of the world that I probably wouldn't be able to see because God knows I can't afford it being a teacher. Got to see several different places in the world that I wouldn't have ever gotten to see, based upon the fact that I could wrestle. So had a lot of different experiences as a competitor. Got to wrestle from the gamut of newbie beginner kids all the way up to guys that were national champions in various countries. So kind of got the full gamut of competitors. I got to be coached by some amazing coaches and actually some amazing men that taught me more than just how to wrestle. Several of them taught me how to be a good coach. Several of them taught me how to be a good man. And a lot of them basically taught me how to deal with different types of people. And I think when it comes down to as a coach, you take your competitive career and you look at the people that worked with you as mentors and say, what did they do really, really well? And can I adapt that to me and my personality? And you hope that you use what they do well in the situations when they present themselves. And I had a wide variety of coaches. everything from my high school coach, who was very, very good at the basics. And he, for lack of a better term, beat us into submission of the basics, to guys that were great technicians, and Coach Holmes and Coach Bradley. My uncle Frank is an amazing technician, breaking things down to what most people would consider to be insignificant, minute details, but he'll tell you it's the reason that it works, and I wholeheartedly believe him.
So we get to see Uncle Frank a couple times a year at the youth level. He always tells me he's your favorite uncle. Why is that?
Oh, now I'm going to get in trouble. I love all my uncles equally, so if any of them are watching. I spent a lot of time with my Uncle Frank. In the summers, I spent time with him and my Uncle Pat in wrestling rooms, going to camps. They always took care of me. Every camp, every opportunity I had to be involved with wrestling and learn, they always fostered it. And for them, particularly with me being the oldest nephew, I think a lot of times they did what they thought was best, and some of it worked. Some of it may necessarily didn't work out the way they wanted it to. So they looked at that and said, well, okay, well, we know that this is good, and we know that that didn't really work out for him. But one of the things I will say about my uncles is when I stepped across the mat and I had to compete against them, we're all very competitive. And they coached their kids to beat me, and I had to compete to beat their kids. And it was never personal. And they always told me that, I win or lose, I would always walk across the mat. They would always put their arm around me. They would always hug me and tell me they were proud of me, whether I won or lost. And that was a big thing for me, to see them be able to separate that idea of being in competition and being one person and working for the kid that was in their care, the kid that they were coaching at the time, to turning around and having to be your relative, somebody that loved you and cared about you. And my Uncle Frank did a really great job of that. But he's always, helped me to open doors. He's given me words of wisdom, and he's got a lot of it because he's a lot older than I am, and he's had a lot more experiences than I have. But he's always there to answer my phone call if I've got a question about something or need to ask his opinion or anything like that. He's always there for me, and I love him for it, and I appreciate it. And he's always wanted to open up his room for me too. So my Uncle Pat does a lot of that too. Right. He does. It's not just the one, but yeah. My Uncle Frank likes to use that one against my Uncle Pat, saying how my Uncle Pat's my godfather. He always likes to tell everybody, yeah, Jonathan's godfather, Uncle Pat, but I'm his favorite uncle. So, but he's a good guy.
Gotcha. So, certainly a great deal. I appreciate you narrowing down the history. That's a lot to cover in a few minutes. That's great to see. We definitely see it in detail when we see the kids out there, and when we have our conversations about what you want to see come into the room. What is the most rewarding part of wrestling for you?
I think as a competitor, the most rewarding piece was the challenge. There are lots and lots of challenges that you get into. And it's just a challenge. It's accomplishing something. It's working towards a goal, and then obviously achieving it is extremely rewarding. But there are times that you don't necessarily reach your goal. I didn't reach my goal in high school of being a state champion. But what was rewarding about that was being forced into a situation where I had to be resilient. And that has paid off for me more in my life than probably having a state title would have ever done. So meeting those challenges and learning how to set goals to become successful has been a really big thing. And I try to instill that in the kids that I coach. I tell them, you're going to set goals, and you may not always achieve your goals, but it's super important that you understand how to go out there and be successful, how to bounce back, how to, if you fail forward. Go get the next best thing and learn from, why you failed, and and that way you can do it better the next time. You know, I think in everybody's competitive career, they have wins that they really, really remember. And I have a few in my competitive career that I don't think I'll ever forget. But one of the things that when people ask me about, what do you really remember from being a competitor, I remember the relationships that I built with coaches and men that I looked up to and wanted to be like. And I really remember the relationships that I developed with guys I competed with and against. And those relationships are still there. I see several people that I competed against, competed with every wrestling season, every freestyle season. I see them out in the community. They're local business owners, or they're lawyers, or doctors, and things of that nature. So those relationships to me, were very, very important. And they stood the test of time. Some guys I won't see for 3, 4, 5 years, and then I'll run into them, and it's kind of like, you just left each other yesterday. So those are the things that I remember the most. Those are the things that I really value the most out of my competitive career. And I really do try. Coach Sauce does probably a much better job of it than I do in verbalizing to our guys how important those relationships are with guys in the team, things of that nature. So we do both try to push that. So.
Yeah, that's good. And you still see the guys come back year after year to come watch how the next team is doing.
Oh, absolutely. That's a super fun part about it. Coach Sauce has plugged into more of the, I call them long-term alums, guys that were in his era that were coached by Coach Cordero while I was coaching at Germantown, and he does a really good job of communicating with them and getting them out to events, the guys that were local or that'll come back for holidays and things of that nature. And I think it's really, really good that they can see where the program's gone from the foundation that they helped to build. And then our more recent alumni that have been there while I have been coaching, we're seeing more and more of those guys come back as some of them are starting to get out of college. Some of them have gone into the military and now fulfilled their service, and they've been able to move either back home or close to home where they can, kind of attend an event here or there. So that's always really, really good for those guys to be able to see those things and kind of see what their legacy has helped build.
Yeah, I think that ties in a lot to what Coach Tremaine wanted to talk about, which was the wrestling family. You have kids that start at a young age now in the youth level. You've got a now junior, 2 juniors that started in kindergarten. It's the first time you've had kids with that much experience come into the program. You have the graduates that still come back. How important is that wrestling family?
For me, it's really, really important. I think probably for me, the reason it's important is because it's an experience that I can relate to very closely because it was my experience. But as we talk to our kids, being a part of the wrestling program here, it's a brotherhood. Coach Sauce likes to tell guys, these are the guys that are gonna be in your wedding. These are the guys that you're gonna, text message pictures of your first child to. These are gonna be the guys that you want to celebrate major milestones in your life with. Spending that much time with another human being, you're going to develop a bond. And those bonds, because of that time and because of the things you have to go through within wrestling, the bleeding together, the sweating together, the tears that come with either falling short of a goal or accomplishing a goal, whether they're, congratulatory kind of things or you're kind of dealing with condolences. Those experiences bond you to those people. And nobody understands what you go through if they're not there with you. So not only are those bonds super, super strong in that, but there's also that shared experience which draws you closer together. And I think it's really, really important for guys to understand, particularly guys now. We live in a culture where it's so much me movement that we really forget that it's the we. You know, you can do some great things on your own, and there are some great people out there that have made it on their own. They're exceptional individuals. But it is much easier to do it as a group. If you surround yourself with people that are like-minded and have similar goals, man, it's really hard to get you off track. They help you. They keep you on your path. You help keep them on your path, and it makes it much, much easier to be successful, regardless of whatever your goal is. And we try to instill that in those guys. Being part of a wrestling family growing up, wrestling was always really, really big for us. But I have a number of cousins, and if you saw us interact, you would swear that we were all brothers. That we all grew up in the same house, that we all shared the same clothes, and we're super, super close. And that for me is a big, big thing. I want other guys to experience that and have those experiences kind of like I did, to be able to have those people in their lives to share those things with. So I think it's really, really important. I personally think you need that within your team to help your team be successful, because they're going to come hard times, and how do you handle those? Are you a group of guys that goes, oh, well, it's kind of tough, I don't want to be here? Or are you the group of guys that says, man, this is really, really tough, he's struggling today, let me go pick him up, let me go pat him on the back, let me help him out? Because 3 days down the road, you may be the guy that's really, really struggling that day, and need somebody to pick you up. So, and I think it's part of building better men, which has been my focus since I've been at Arlington. Coach Dawson and I kind of came together in that first year, and I told him what my goal was, and he had an appreciation for it. He understood it. He understood what I wanted to do, my overall scheme, and he really took to it. Really, really did. And he does a really great job in his role and what we're doing. But that idea of building better men, it's massively important. I think having that wrestling family allows you to be able to venture out and try things in different roles about being the best brother you can be, or being the best mentor you can be, and building those relationships. And that's a big, big thing within our program is be the best you can be at everything. Don't just be a good wrestler, but be the best you can be.
Yeah, it helps too, having the shared facilities and the partnership that we have with the kids. Have a chance to go attend the high school events, and we make that part of the program where every time there's a home meet we're going to attend. They look up to those guys. They're some of them really, really high up, but it's a big deal. You see those little kids' faces that the high school team is essentially their wrestling celebrity at the chance. Whoa, those are the big guys. Those are the guys that, he was in the club last year. Now look at him go. I mean, it's just, they see that, and they kind of see that the foundation of what it leads to and what it could be. So it's absolutely for me as well.
I think y'all do a great, great job with that. And for me growing up, watching my uncle's teams wrestle, that was kind of how I was. I could tell you just about every kid that was going to walk out, what weight they walked out at, what year in school they were, that, they were, at least for me, as far as wrestling was concerned, they were kind of like the pros. That was a high thing for me, seeing those guys. And I did look up to them. It was one of those things where, particularly in my family at the time, my uncles had all gone to Father Ryan, and I had this dream that I was going to end up at Father Ryan in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And I had a really good bond with a lot of the guys that were on the team, because I spent a lot of time in Pat's room as a middle schooler when we would go to Nashville and through camps and things like that. And I think that's kind of important. Look to where you want to go. Obviously live in the moment. And as a youth wrestler, it's good for you to concentrate on where you're at and what you're doing. But if you're really passionate about something, you kind of have one eye in the present and you have one eye in the future, or at least one eye down your path where you know where you're going. And so when I came to Arlington, that was one of the things that, in my head at least, I really wanted. I wanted our youth kids to not only really want to wear our singlet and represent our team, but I almost wanted it to be one of those things where it was, they wanted to chase it. Like, it's one thing to want something, it's another thing to chase it, to look at it and say, that's a goal. My goal is to be on the high school team, wear that singlet, and understand what it meant to represent that team and that program. And I think Pat's done a really just an awesome job at Ryan in producing that. Their youth kids are like that. They go to home matches. You see them lined up along the mat, and their eyes are just wide open, and they're watching and soaking it in, and they're yelling and screaming and cheering and things like that. And I really kind of looked at that and said, that's what I'd like to have in my program. And so having those kids at our events is, for me, it's really important, because it impresses upon them, who we are, what we do, what we're about. And, selfishly as a coach, I like seeing that. I like seeing those kids get excited when we walk down the tunnel and they get to high five some of the guys, and you can see it in some of their faces. They're just like, oh, that's so like, I got a high five from so-and-so, And, I know Coach Sauce does a really good job of this every time we walk out. He calls kids by name. He high fives them, some of them he shakes their hand. And you can see it in their faces how excited they get. I tend to get a little bit more tunnel vision before we compete. And I try to make sure that I speak to those kids after the matches are over with. But Coach Sauce does a really good job of being in that moment and making sure those kids feel super special, like in that moment. And then watching those kids, I can just tell there are some of them you just look at them and you're like, that kid's going to come to us and they're going to be hooked. They're going to buy in. They really want to put that singlet on and go out and compete hard for not only themselves, but the program as well. And that's, as a coach building a program, you really can't ask for much more.
I can tell you firsthand, Connor, my middle son, has taken off the past couple of years. But after going to the high school events and watching it, he's convinced he wants to come back this year because he wants to be on the high school team. So see how that worked out, but I'm excited to have him back out there.
That's great.
So you came to Arlington a couple of years ago. It was a growing program. You talked a lot about kind of the mindset coming in, building better men. What else did you do to come in and make it the 6-time region champ, and it is what it is today? You don't want to give too much away, but
yeah, I've been watching a lot about Penn State, how secret the Kale is, and I'm kind of rethinking how many people I've helped in my career. No, I'm just joking. No, I'll help anybody that wants it.
Yeah,
I think coaching today is much, much different than coaching 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago while I was competing. Coaches were coaches. They showed moves. They were there to put you through workouts. If you struggled with something, they put their arm around you. They, have a teammate help you out. And today, as an assistant coach, you get to do all those things. And while I was at Germantown, I loved my job with Tony. But being a head coach, you kind of have to turn it into being a CEO. There's so many things that you have to do and so many things that you miss out on as a coach that got you into coaching. I got into coaching because I wanted to help build better men. I got into coaching because I wanted to help guys achieve goals in wrestling. As a head coach, I get to do that, not at the volume that I want to because I've got to handle paperwork or publicity, deal with sanitation and all kinds of other stuff. But I had to learn really quickly that in order to be a successful head coach, I was going to have to learn to be the CEO. I was going to have to learn how to multitask better than I already did, and I was a pretty good multitasker at that point. And I had to learn that sacrifice wasn't only just for my athletes and working towards a goal, that I had to take on that idea of I'm going to have to make some sacrifices, whether it was personal time or sacrifices in some other area. I have to do that. And came in. When I took the job, I had a very generalized plan. I had a 1-year plan, I had a 3-year plan, I had a 5-year plan, and had a 10-year plan. And I felt like it was a good template for wherever I went to, whatever program I went to. I could use this template. I would have to make some adjustments to it, obviously depending on where I was at, but I felt like it was a good template to use. Took the job at Arlington and started looking at, okay, what do I need to change? How do I need to change it? What can I keep? How does what's already in existence fit into this template? And what can I do to morph what's here into meeting my goals for what I wanted the program to be? It took a little while. I was off on a lot of the things that I wanted within those plans. I think I had to reevaluate before we got to the 3-year plan. I had to reevaluate. I had to make a number of changes. Things were a little bit different than what I thought was going to happen. I aimed really, really big. I think what they tell you is if you aim for the stars and you fall short, you at least hit the moon. That was kind of how I felt about my 3-year plan. I felt like, hey, I aimed for the sun and I only made the moon. So the goal still is to get to the sun. How do I get there? What kind of changes do I need to make? I had to start making some of those changes. Some of them were great. Some of them worked. Some of them didn't. But when it all came back to was building relationships with the guys that I had in the room, making sure that everybody understood what the standard was, making sure that everybody understood that they were expected to meet the standard, and we moved forward. And I have been very blessed, is probably the best word to say, as far as having help. Not only on my high school staff, but also with our youth program. I've had some amazing coaches come and be a part of that program. Obviously, you, Coach Jenkins, Coach Caskey, Coach Pagan, and there are so many more. If I sat here and tried to name them, I'd be here for the rest of the time. But did such a good job with those young kids and building a great base so that as they started to flow into the high school, it made my high school staff's job a little bit easier. We were able to get everybody on the same path much quicker than I had originally thought that we would. And I got blessed with some great guys to coach with on my high school staff. My first year it was Coach Hussey, Coach Sossaman, and Coach Fleming. And Coach Fleming was great. He was one of my former wrestlers in Germantown, made a huge impact that first year of starting the program and helping the kids to see kind of what I was about, where I was going. And he did a good job because he's a young guy. Coach Sossaman did a great job in expressing to the guys about how I wanted things to go, and that I'm going to be tough on you. It doesn't mean that I don't like you. It actually means that I like you a lot. I just want to see you succeed. And the tougher I am on you, the more that I think you can succeed. And we had a great group of guys that bought into that. And I really think that Coach Fleming did a great job there. He was with us for another year before he started his career in education and being an athletic director at Soulsville. And he's gone on to bigger and better things. Coach Hussey ended up moving over to Whitehaven and is a part of their football staff, which is a great football staff to be a part of. He's doing great things over there. The next year, picked up Coach Weary, who stayed with us for 2 years while he was at Arlington. And Coach Weary had never wrestled before, but he was super excited to be a part of the program. He liked building relationships with the guys. He got in there, told me, he said, Coach, I don't know how to do this yet. He said, I'll figure it out. He said, I got a good athletic mind. I can figure things out real quick, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. And if you can teach it to me, I can teach it to them. And he did. And he was a big part of why we had several guys in that third year that were so successful, that were bigger guys, because he could get in and wrestle with them and give them because he's a big guy, He gave them good looks, and he could do the things that I asked him to do with them to give them the look that they needed to prep them for, whoever they were going to be wrestling. And losing him, it hurt. We built relationships between him and the kids that were coming back. Our coaching staff was pretty tight knit. We enjoyed being with each other, and we had kind of just gotten into where we were really flowing, and everybody kind of understood their role and knew their assignments and responsibilities and things like that. But he had things that he needed to do, and ended up becoming a Memphis police officer. He's moving on to bigger and better things. I can't really say anything about that other than that, but he's going to get ready to take off, and he's moving on to being more successful within his career. And then we picked up Coach Slaughter, who Coach Slaughter had come from Ohio. He had wrestled in Ohio, had a career where he was a small guy. Actually, he and Coach Salzman were talking about it. They ended up wrestling the same weight when they were seniors in high school, and now Coach Slaughter's our big guy. He's 230, 240. He's just walking around. He's our unit. So he does a really good job of being able to relate to a number of kids, regardless of where they are in our lineup. And Coach Slaughter, I'll tell you, he says, Coach, I like working with the guys that maybe aren't as gifted as some of the others, because that was where I was when I was in high school, and I feel like I can help them more. And then he'll turn around and walk on the other side of the room, and he'll work with one of our kids that's an extremely gifted and successful wrestler, and can work with them and help them to improve upon the things that they do. He was really, really big with Austin Ancliffe and helping him with putting bigger bodies on him and putting him in positions that Austin really had to work and figure out how to score from. So he was a great addition to our program. And then we added two great young guys this year, and both of them are going to be extremely good coaches. They were great this year. Still trying to get their legs up underneath them in the program and what they're responsible for, and kind of learning the system and things like that. But they did an extraordinarily good job this year. Coach Miller and Coach Roden. And they helped a lot with a lot of our younger football players with a football background and being bigger guys. And so that was great. And I've been really, really lucky that I've been able to have guys like that I can turn things over to and say, here, I need you to do this. And I don't have to stand over them and watch them. I can give them things to do, or I can give them what I want them to do to help other kids, and they can do them. And now Coach Sauce, Coach Slaughter, and most of the time I don't even have to tell them anymore. They'll just come to me and say, hey, I'm going to go work with this guy today, and because he needs some extra reps here, or this, that, and the other. And it's really great as a head coach, trying to manage all the things that you do, for them to be able to take things off your plate to make it more manageable so that you can get things done and you can help individual kids. It's massive. I can't stress it enough. And I know you have some experience with that, with the number of coaches that you have, and it always makes it easier. I commonly say, the more hands you have, the less work you have to do, or the more hands make for lighter work. And I can't stress enough how much I've been blessed to be able to have those guys in my program and on my staff. So.
Yeah, it's certainly great. Both of us have had a lot of good assistance over the years that keeps the program going. I think at one point we had 14 and one coach for every 4 to 5 wrestlers just 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, that's big. I mean, that's huge.
Yep. So outside of the Arlington world, who do you follow the most? Who do you keep up with? And
I really like Cornell. Super excited for the next couple of years. Hoping they can bring a trophy back there, or not a trophy, but the trophy. Be nice to see it, go to a team besides the normal power. I call them Power 5. But I really like Kyle Dake. I've liked him since he was a freshman. I watched one of his first matches and just kind of looked at it and was like, man, that guy's different, and you always have guys that as college guys, they get to their junior year and they take off and you're like, wow, that kid's really, really good. But I watched him as a freshman and I just thought to myself, like, this guy's going to do some really great things and he's going to be really successful. And so I started watching him and I started taking some of the things that he did back into my room at Germantown. And I watched him a lot. I really like the way he wrestles. And then when people started talking to him and hearing him talk about the way that he competes. I mean, the guy is an ultra competitor. He competes in every single aspect of his life, and there's no holding back. I watched him actually. He was at a camp at Cornell, and he was playing spike ball with these like kids that were like 12 years old, and he was just wearing them out. There was no mercy, and I was just like, man. And then to hear some stories about that Coach Cole and other people talk about how like uber competitive he is, even about really, really small stuff. I looked at that and said, you know, well, that's a guy that wants to win, but he's also competing in every aspect of his life. And we have a saying in our program, it's AWC, always be competing. Always be competing in everything. You know, compete to get the best grade, compete to be the best son, compete to be the best brother. Because I tell them, you know, later on in life, you're going to be competing, and you want to be the best father, or you want to be the best husband, you want to be the best partner, or you know, whatever it is, best employee, or best boss, or whatever it is, best leader that you're going to try to go out there and do. Always be competing, and not in the sense of like wins and losses being a success, but compete against yourself. You know, compete to be better tomorrow than you were today. You know, whatever you did yesterday was great. And it's super that you did it yesterday, but how can you be better today? And watching and listening to him talk, you know, you can see that he's like that. And every aspect of his life, particularly in wrestling, it's, you know, you look at that guy and you're just like, some people go, well, you know, he didn't score a lot of points. I remember when he was a senior and he and David Taylor were, you know, that was the deal. I actually watched all three of those matches, got to watch the match at Southern Scuffle, being 5 feet off the mat, and seeing how uber competitive he was in person was just extraordinary. You know, he has this ability where he says, you know, I don't want anybody to score any points. I don't want my opponent to score any points. And that kind of sounds a little boring because you're always just going to do defense, and that's yeah. But he talks about owning positions and owning every position. You know, owning the hand fight, owning the head position, hands. As a wrestling geek, I appreciate all that. And I listen to that, and that helps me be able to teach some of those really small, intricate little pieces to some of our better guys. Because as you get better and better and better, your ability to become better it diminishes. Your jumps can't be as big.
Right.
So a lot of times it comes down to those little bitty things to make you so much better, to get you over the hump of beating an individual or to get you to a goal. And so watching a lot of his stuff and watching him teach was massively important to me, because I wanted to know the thought behind it. I wanted to know why it worked and those kinds of things. And I really like watching him. I've really liked watching his international career. I know it probably hasn't panned out the way he's really wanted it to, but he's got 2 world titles. You know, hopefully he makes the team in 2021. I'm really excited to see him wrestle Chamizo on the 25th. Chamizo's been running his mouth as he normally does, so I'm looking forward to seeing Dave kind of shut him up. But I guess we'll see about that. But I really like watching him compete. And then the other person I really like is Yadi Diakomahalis. You know, he and Dave share a lot of the same things, and they're great athletes. They're great technically and positionally. Both of them are super, super quick, and both of them have great defenses. And just watching them wrestle, there's going to be a highlight reel anytime they compete. You know, and it doesn't matter who they're wrestling; they're going to pull some crazy something off. And it seems like the better people they wrestle, the more they step up to the challenge. And maybe that plays a big part in it for me is they step up to the challenge. They don't run from it. They're looking forward to it. They find ways to be successful in there. But I really like the way that Johnny talks about evaluating himself. He talks a lot about looking at his performance and whether or not he's able to perform well, to hit pieces of technique. And his mind, as far as a wrestling mind, to me is just, it's crazy. He did an interview and he told him, I want to learn every position that you could possibly be in a wrestling match. I want to be fluent in it, and I want to know how to be successful in all those positions, which is a massive undertaking. But he studies. I mean, he studies all the time. The kid had to have double elbow surgery coming out of high school. Couldn't do much of anything. Where most kids would have sat around and ate Cheetos and done next to nothing. He sat and watched some ridiculous number of hours of film on international greats and what they were doing and pieces of technique so that he could see them in his head. And then when he had the chance to go out and be able to work out, and be able to spar and drill, he tried to pull off those pieces of technique, do those things. So his mind, in the sense of like trying to master every position and know how to connect those pieces. And I think that's, for me, a big draw into him is how do you connect different techniques and pieces of techniques and situations and positions so that you can continue to wrestle, never stopping, so that you're always coming out ahead in those exchanges. And I know some people criticize him for that because sometimes he has some matches that are kind of out there, you're looking at 20 points on the board and stuff. And but he's always really exciting to watch. He's really fun to watch. I think he, for a younger generation, is their David Taylor. I think David Taylor was a lot like that. I think that's what drove people into him, was he was always wrestling. He was always flowing. He was always doing these crazy things and putting points on the board and stuff like that. I think that's kind of what draws a lot of younger people to Yanni, is that he wrestles in that style. It's always exciting. It's always fun. Again, he's a special kind of guy. I think he's going to be great. Inevitably, I think he's going to have a great career. So I really enjoy watching him too. Excuse me.
He's got a great mindset for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I could watch him do an interview and get just as much out of it as I could watch him wrestle a tournament and pick apart his matches. Always trying to learn from those guys that are on that level. So growing up, I really was into the Brands brothers, probably because we were about the same size. It was them and John Smith. Those were the three guys that I looked at, and I kind of idolized them. And I tend to be a little bit more like the Brands in my mentality and how I kind of wrestled in the sense of my attitude and aggression level and things of that nature. But as far as the things that I hit, the technique and stuff like that, positions I like to wrestle out of, I was more like John Smith. I like to low single. I like to duck under. Coach will also tell you that, if you start messing around with Coach Simpson and you get a little too competitive, Coach Simpson may drop the bottom out of his stance. Funny sits the mat. So we'll dig at Coach Sauce because he hits me with the outside firearms all the time. But those were the guys that I really, really liked. And I think for kids today, thanks to Flow Wrestling, they have a lot of people they can go out and look at. And a lot of guys that they can go follow based upon either their mentality towards the sport, because I don't think you have to be pigeonholed into one particular mentality and style to wrestle in. And I think Flow gives them access to a lot of those guys that they can kind of look at and say, I want to be like that guy, or I want to be like that guy. So I think that's really good for them too.
It's funny you mentioned Flo and John Smith. I grew up in Jersey. When I was growing up, I knew who the good schools were. I used to get my freestyle coach in the spring was a guy named Joey Mercury, 4-time New Jersey state champ, wrestled for Iowa. And I'm like, yeah, Iowa's good. Yeah, I don't remember. I didn't know until within the past couple of years that he was actually wrestling John Smith back in the day. So a video popped on my time. I was like, wait a minute. I knew he was good. I knew he could internationally, but he was that guy.
Oh yeah.
He was out there competing with John Smith. Like, oh, okay. I wish Flo was around when we were kids, because the access and the ability to have all that information, I probably would have studied up a little more when I was younger.
Wouldn't we all? If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, I got to see John when I was super, super young. We had a group of guys that was in the know, and they brought in here. I couldn't even tell you how young I was. I was young enough that I didn't pay attention to who he was. I didn't know who he was at the time. and wouldn't know who he was until years later, and then kind of had that like mind-blowing moment. It was like, oh my gosh, that was that guy. That guy was here. Like, I got to watch him whip up on my uncles, which I couldn't believe. I was like, I thought my uncles were the end all be all because they would always beat the snot out of me. But I watched him just wear my uncles out, and then got to meet Gene Mills. He got brought in to do a camp, and you look at the accolades that those guys have, and you're like, okay, he's like a really good wrestler. He knows his stuff. But it wouldn't be till a couple of years after I met Gene Mills that I actually got to watch him tape and watch him wrestle internationally, and I was just like, wow, like that guy was really, really good. And I think the guys that are coming up now and in this generation that have flow, I think it makes a difference. I think they're able to do things that we were not able to do at such a young age because we didn't have access to it. I think knowledge of coaches plays a big part in that. Not to say that the coaches before this time period weren't knowledgeable. I just don't know that there was as quantity as the quality. And I think that's helped out a lot because now you're getting kids that are coming into high school that have such a better base than when I was competing. And I know you probably kind of can feel the same way. But just because they have that ability to have access to it. And I know my guys watch it and we'll talk about it and we'll talk about these things and that thing and so on and so forth. But, obviously you need the basics. If you don't have the basics, you can't pull off, the cool things that like Yanni or Dake or Taylor or Burroughs or all these guys are hitting. But when you start breaking them down as a coach, you're looking at, well, it's the basic piece here. It's a basic penetration step. It's a basic double leg. Those kinds of things. But flow at least gives them something to look at and go, oh, there's the next level. And there's the next level after that and the next level after that. So if I want to get there, I got to do these things and follow this progression, which is great.
For sure. And John was the one that actually welcomed us into the wrestling room a couple of years ago. We made that Oklahoma trip.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
He was the guy that answered the door, and we were standing there in shock. He said, "Hey, how you guys doing? Come on in. Let me show you around." And he's getting ready to wrestle Iowa for a big duel, and he's hanging out in the sweatpants before the weigh-ins, just kind of showing us around a little bit before Coach Esposito and Tyler took us away.
It's kind of
really cool guy.
The goat answers his own door, man. Like, I thought you'd have a door for that.
Yeah, would you have somebody for this? But yeah, very cool guy, very good to talk to, very easygoing.
Oh yeah. Several years ago, when I was coaching Team Tennessee at the junior duels, we were lucky enough that we got to work out in their room. And I got to meet him again, this time as a grown man, not the little kid that had got to see him actually out there wrestle. So it made a little bit bigger impact because I actually then knew who he was and all those kinds of things. And, you're right, he's super humble, and he's more than willing to help anybody out. And I kind of took that as a coach, I looked at that, that's the kind of coach I want to be. Regardless of where I am or what I'm doing or anything like that, help out the people that are around me. And that made a big impact on me too. But you're right, he's super, super humble and very unassuming. I think if you're, in Oklahoma, everybody knows who he is. But I think if you put him in a non-wrestling environment, he's just a guy.
Right. Yep. So you put in, I know you guys put in a ton of hours. What motivates you to keep coming back and keep doing all that stuff?
The same thing that motivates any coach at any level to give up their time. When I say give up their time, it's really not like I'm giving up time. I choose to do it, and I make a conscious choice. And every minute that I'm with the guys or that I'm doing paperwork or that I'm putting together a practice or competition schedule, everything that goes on in coaching, you make that choice. When you get to see guys accomplish their goals and you get to see them become successful people, whether it's in wrestling or not, it gives you a sense that you're doing the right thing. and that every choice you've made, in some cases to spend time away from your family or to spend time away from what you like to enjoy doing outside of wrestling, I'm not going to say it validates it. It does to an extent, but it gives it value, and it makes it easier to make that choice again and again and again and again and again. I think for young coaches, they look at that and they go, if we're not winning, like, why am I here? I think older coaches, because of their experiences, they figured out that it's not about the wins and the losses. It's about helping people. It's about helping guys that you care for, that look to you and entrust in you, that you're trying to guide them on the right path to be successful people, individuals, whether it's in wrestling or not. There are lots of stories I could tell in my coaching career about guys that won big matches or have these accolades and things like that. But I go back to kids that were a part of some of my teams that if you looked at their careers and looked at their wins and losses, you would say that's a mediocre kid. But you hear me talk about them away from the mat, and I would always say those kids are going to be successful human beings. They're going to be successful people in their careers or in their personal lives and things like that. And so, I look at a lot of them, and they're doing really, really well in their careers. They're married with, been married for a number of years, have several kids. Their kids are good-looking kids, beautiful kids. I see pictures on Facebook when I go to the beach, or they send me, a text message with a picture and say, Coach, this is my daughter. Preparing those kids to go out and be better people and better men, it makes it worth it. It makes it easier to make those choices. I have family that I want to spend time with and things of that nature too. But I choose to be there over the number of hours, and I choose to be there the days that I'm there. And I think it's really important that the guys understand that I'm choosing this. I could, I've got a big enough coaching staff now that we can, dole out days and say, you take this day and I'll take this day and he'll take that day. But for me, it's important for the guys to see me in there every day. I'd take off a couple of days in the middle of last season because I got really, really sick, and it drove me nuts. I had to tell Coach Simpson, I said, you realize I just missed 3 practices. It's the first 3 practices in my entire coaching career I've ever missed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just, you choose to be there. And I think it's important for those guys to see that when you make a commitment to people, you honor the commitment. There are days that, not everybody wakes up every day and feels good and has, you don't wake up every day going, man, I've got all this energy. I'm ready to go into practice and get everybody going rah, rah, rah. But I made a commitment to them. They made a commitment to me. I chose to be there. So I'm going to give them everything I have. In that sense of, I'm giving you everything I have, and I'm going to ask you to give me everything you have. I'm going to set that example. I think that's really important. And my coaching staff does a great job of that. Coach Dawson and Coach Slaughter have done it for a number of years. Coach Miller and Coach Roden were the same way this year. Coach Roden, when he first started out with us, he just looked at me and says, Coach, how do you do this, man? He says, I'm worn out. We hadn't even started practice yet. I said, man, you just got to get up and ring the bell every day, man. So you make choices. You make choices. And I do every day. Whether it's go in for 30 minutes or go in for 4 or 5 hours, and make those choices.
Yep. Okay. What are a couple favorite quotes that you use to motivate your guys, or that motivate you?
Always be competing. And if you talk to any of the guys that have ever wrestled for me, even back deep into my days at NUS and Mid-South Wrestling, they'll tell you Coach Simpson always competes. If I step out there, it doesn't matter whether we're playing dodgeball or spike ball or whatever it is, I'm going to compete. When we push that on our guys, the AWC is always there. We always talk about that. A number of years ago, Coach Salzman brought one to me that I thought was great, and it fit real well with our coaching mentality and what we were trying to get the kids to buy in with the program, which is success is never owned, it's rented, and rents due every day. So we had to kind of talk about, sweat equity. What is sweat equity? How do you pay your rent for success? That was a really big one for me. And I think we explained it well enough that the kids understood, and they did a really great job with it. And that was a big one for that year. The one that's always stuck with me is anything worth doing is worth doing right. So if you're going to spend the time to do something, do it right. Don't go halfway. Don't just go through the motions to say, oh, I did it. Do it right. Do it to the best of your ability, because it'll pay off. I'm not going to sit here and say that the guy that works the hardest is always going to be successful. He's always going to get a W, because it just doesn't turn out like that. There are factors that happen within competition that you yourself can't control as a competitor. And I think the earlier in life you can learn that, the better it is for you, particularly with your ability to handle high-level competition. But the harder you work at things and the more effort you put into them, the better you're going to get. Like I said, it's not necessarily a L's and W's, but it is a performance. It is a progression. And I think that's more important than the wins and the losses. We've had several guys that have come through our program and they struggled to get that first W or to win on a fairly consistent basis in competition. We don't always wrestle with the softest of schedules. So for some of those guys, it can be a downer because they're not getting their hand raised. And, we have to, as a coaching staff, we have to do a good job in communicating to those individuals that, hey, you didn't get your hand raised, but you got to this position and you got to finish, or you did this. And, a week or two ago, you couldn't even get to that position. So there's progression. I think for young guys, that's really, really hard. They struggle with it, whether it's ego or whether it's, right now, there's a big fear of failure. I don't want to fail at anything. I don't want anybody to see that I fail at anything. Within our program, we always preach about, we don't want you to fail, but if you do, fail forward. And I think for kids nowadays, that's really hard to buy into. And I will say this, Coach Simpson is a great salesman of that. He will get a kid to believe that even struggles. We've had kids in our lineup that struggled for 2 years before they got their first varsity win. But they believed him. He told them all the time, get better at this, fail forward, do these things. And, they picked up several wins. This year we had a guy on our team that was like that, and he ended up qualifying for the state tournament. It was a massive turnaround. And, that was a kid that believed in the process. He believed Coach Austin. That's kind of one of those things. Anything worth doing is worth doing. And I will say this, we preached that to that kid, and that kid only had a couple of things with buddies. He was in practice. He was going to do it right. Mainly because he knew that if he didn't, Coach Austin was going to jump his behind. But that's okay. Whatever it takes to get you into that mindset. But he did see he saw an increase in his success and performance and progress, and then he also saw it in his wins and losses.
Yeah, good stuff. I think it was you that told me a couple of years ago, if all you know is that person at a tournament or competition, then you really don't know them. So I think it was great having you come on, let people get to a little more access to you and get to know a little bit more about you.
Absolutely. I'm a person, I promise. I'm not, I know
I know you are.
Look, smile, but there are a couple of times that I do. So
we appreciate that. I always appreciate when you work with the kids too, because the kids that do have a fun time when you can come back and onto the mat, relax, have a little fun.
Oh, man, it's awesome, man. I'm telling you, you got so many hammers in that room, man. I get excited every time I walk in there. I'm like, man, these kids are going to be so good.
Yeah, it was a delicate balance last year with our long season to keep them interested, having fun, and still progressing. So,
absolutely,
I think they would have done really well at states. But hey, it is what it is. They got plenty more years left.
Hey, it's a life lesson. Not everything's going to go your way, and it's not always rainbows and unicorns. So
yeah. So is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover?
I think last time we talked about, I can't remember whether it was you brought it up or Tremaine brought it up about if I had any advice to give to younger wrestlers,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Yeah.
And I gave an answer that I think kind of came off a little bit as like a stock answer. So maybe I'll do a little bit better job of communicating it this time. I think for young kids, particularly those kids that are walking in and starting wrestling, learn to love it. Find an aspect of it that you really like and focus on that. And I think for young kids, if they fall in love with the sport at a very young age, then they want to come in, they want to get better, they want to learn, and they develop. And those are kids that are long-term kids that will continue to get better. They're going to have careers that are elongated, and they're going to have an enjoyable experience. And I would tell those young kids, don't worry about the wins and the losses. Even in the high school program, our kids, I preach to them all the time. It doesn't matter what you do early in the season. The only thing that really matters is the postseason. If you can make the postseason, everybody starts out 0-0, and you go from there. So I tell them, I'm not really caring about wins and losses until we get to the postseason. And the only reason that I care about the wins and losses there is because you have to win to stay in. If you lose, you go home. And I really like to win. Don't get me wrong, ultra competitive person. But my bigger thing is that, and I said this to the group of kids I had when we qualified all of our starters to go to the state tournament. It wasn't important for me that we won the region or that we set this record. It was more important for me that every kid that put on our uniform got to have extra time with one another.
Yeah.
So when we get to the postseason, winning for me means that we get to be together longer. Those guys get to spend another night together in a hotel where they're gonna, share bonds or share stories or share experiences and get to be around one another in that kind of environment, which doesn't get replicated outside of the season and at home. And that's the thing for me. That's why the wins and losses matter at that point in time, is because of the progression. You can spend more time with each other. But I think it's really important that youth kids really get to learn to love the sport. And I say that because my uncles have told me that after years and years and years of coaching on different levels, that if you want the secret to getting kids to buy into wrestling and having them spend time, all this time that you ask them to spend and trying to develop and progress and get better, they have to love it. If you love what you're doing, it's not going to work, because you make the choice. You're like, I want to be here because I really like this. So I think that's really, really important on the youth level. And I think youth coaches are massively important. You guys are more important than I am, because if the kids aren't learning to love wrestling and they're not learning kind of how to wrestle, that they're not going to be, by the time they get to high school, they're going to have a very, very brief career coach. They're not going to like it. They're just going to quit. And I hate seeing that. So I think that's massively important to younger kids. Find something about wrestling you really, really like and focus on it. And that will open up doors to where you're going to find other things that you really like about the sport and you really like doing within the sport. I've had kids that have wrestled for me for 4 years in high school, never missed a practice. They've been there. They put forth maximum effort, and their career is over. And they look at me and they say, "Coach, I never really liked to compete, but I liked this aspect of the sport, and that's what kept me in it." And I'm very thankful for those kids. They're great kids, and I really liked having them on their team. I really enjoy the relationship that I have with them. Many of them I still talk to from time to time now, even though they're college kids and they're super, super busy. They still send me a text, or when they come home for holidays, they still come by and see me and stuff like that. It's great. I'm glad that they found some aspect of the sport that they really, really enjoyed and kept them in. So that's what I would tell them.
That's great.
Now, something I'm going to tell you and something that I haven't let out of the bag yet. So, which I'm going to do, I'm going to string out over a pretty long process, is I have already started planning and development for the wrestling facility that's going to be built on our campus. I cannot divulge when they're going to start or when they're going to try to start. I can't give out much information. I'll be kind of bleeding it out as much as I can and when I can. Very, very soon that'll start. But what I can say is this, is that if you're an Arlington Wrestling fan, if you are in any way, shape, form, or fashion involved with the program now or will be in the future, there's never been a more exciting time to be a part of this program. The school district is investing in our program and investing highly in our program. And I feel confident in saying the days of kids looking around and saying, where do I want to go? What are my options? And let me weigh the pros and cons, could be coming to an end very, very soon. As if everything goes as planned, they're going to look at us and say, yeah, there's nowhere else to look.
Yeah.
That's the big one. So really, really excited about that. And like I said, wish I could say more, but as soon as I can say more, I'll be putting it out there. So be looking forward to that. Be watching your social media. Be paying attention to, I'll make sure that the youth club can put it out there as well, but super excited about it. So.
I couldn't be more excited. And you might not even been around the time that we were going around to different facilities looking for more space. We were begging local businesses who had, enough space. Hey, can we put a couple mats in here?
I do remember that. I believe that was my first year. And I was coming in and they were going, we're talking to so-and-so and they're going to give us some space in there. I think it was like an auto shop or something. And I just thought, oh, great. That's what I need. Somebody be hitting a cut double and fly into an engine hanging up or hit an oil slick and break a leg or something.
Yeah, we chased down a couple rabbits that didn't get any closer. Hey, we were trying. So that's exciting. So it's a big deal. I knew it when the announcement went out. I was really excited about it. I know our guys are excited about it. We can't wait to hear.
We won't have to chase down the space.
That's right.
I'll just say that. We won't have to chase down. I'll put it to you like this. People will be chasing us.
Yeah.
People will be chasing us more than some of them are right now. So
that's going to be great.
Looking forward to it. Very excited about it. So
yeah. Well, Coach, that's all I had to cover. Did you have anything else or any other questions, comments?
I think that's good, man.
Okay.
That's
a good note to leave on.
Yeah, I kind of was. I put that in the back pocket. I wanted to kind of end on that. So.
Yeah, Tremaine, he texted me. They ran out of power and there was an issue he had to deal with the Admiral, so he was kind of tied up.
I got it. Well, I was about to say it kind of looks nasty out here. So the other day it was kind of looked like this, and I lost power for several hours. So I kind of understand. So.
Yep. But he'll be on the next one.
Awesome. Yeah, I kind of, we talked about that before, or I guess after we had closed that last episode, and I think that's something that I know I would really like to talk about it. I'd like to talk with y'all, kind of have an open discussion about that. Just, not only what does it take to coach on those different levels, time-wise, knowledge-wise, those kinds of things, but also the different challenges that you got to face and stuff like that. So I think that would be a very interesting topic for people to hear about. Because I think a lot of parents and a lot of people out there just don't know, they don't understand because they don't have any experience with it. But if they do have experience with it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, now I kind of understand how that is or what that is and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think it's a great topic. I think we're booked up next week, but I think the following week is what we're looking at getting that scheduled.
Okay. Yeah, let me look at my calendar. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it should be a problem, but let me look at the calendar before I say something and then end up having to have something there. So
let me stop recording real quick. So episode 11, that's a wrap.